What's going on, guys? I'm Bill and welcome to Bill's How To. Today I'm going to show you guys how to fix a hole in the ceiling. So if we have a look up the top here, we've got a hole in the ceiling. If I poke around the edges, it's actually pretty soft. So I'm assuming it was previous water damage that slowly bubbled over time and had given way. Either way, the repair process is going to be exactly the same. Let's get straight into it, guys. Let's do this. Alright guys, so this is the hole that we're dealing with. Like I said, you can tell here the inside of the drywall, plasterboard, gyprock sheet, whatever it is that you guys want to call it, is actually starting to crumble and break away. So that's a good indicator that we've had a bit of water come through here. At the same time, if I poke around the edges, you can see it's got little soft sections. So if I poke around in here, it's actually pretty soft, especially around here. You can see there it's completely detached. So the first thing we're going to do is open this section here up and see how far back the damage actually goes. Shouldn't be too hard. My finger goes straight through. What I'm going to do is just pull apart little bits of this section here, especially where it's really flaky and crumbly. You can see there it just completely falls apart. That bit there is actually pretty solid. So I'll just work my way around, get a good feel of exactly what's going on in there. Where this crumbly section stops, the size of the hole isn't going to make a difference. The repair process is going to be exactly the same. And it's actually pretty easy to repair these ceilings. We're getting ready to paint all these ceilings and walls in this property. So I'm just going to quickly go through this one here. Keep pulling it apart until it no longer wants to break, as we've got here. So that is all now nice and solid. So that's actually the hole that we're working with now. A little bit bigger than what we started with, but it doesn't really matter. Like I said, the repair process is going to be exactly the same. So I'll just pull apart any of these little sections here. And I think that'll just about do it. So we've got a nice little hole now up in the ceiling. Looks a lot worse than what it was initially, but this is what's actually involved in order to repair it. So now that we've got exactly the area that we need to work on, the rest of it's nice and sturdy, so we're not too concerned about anything else. Now I'll show you guys how to fix this. Alright guys, so now that we know exactly how big the area is that we're dealing with, we've broken away all this loose section here. The rest of it's nice and secure. What we're going to do next is take our tape measure. Now I've seen a lot of people get really caught up on this section here. They struggle to cut a piece of drywall or a piece of plasterboard or gyprock, whatever it is that you guys want to call it, to fit the hole. That's not what you're supposed to do. What you actually do is cut any kind of piece of drywall as long as it's bigger than the hole. Then we're going to cut the hole here to suit our actual piece that we're going to fill it in with. And I'll show you guys what I mean. So what we're going to do is take a tape measure, measure across roughly how far we want to go. So I'm going to take our measurement from the edge here where I've peeled it off all the way back to the other side. So we've got here about 260 millimeters. Then we'll take our width. We've got here also 170, so 260 and 170. So something important that you guys should be aware of is the size of your sheeting. Now, the thickness of your sheeting is different on your walls and your ceilings. If we have a look, we've got two scrap pieces here. This top one is 10 millimeters thick. That's generally used for walls. And then we've got the thicker piece, which is 13 mil. That one there is used for your ceiling. So we've got two scrap pieces, look almost exactly the same, except for the thickness. So just be careful whenever you're cutting for your ceilings, you're using a 13 mil piece of drywall, plasterboard, gyprock sheet. Now that we've got that, we can take our measurement. So 270, 160, we only need to go roughly, and I'll show you guys why in a second. So we'll just mark that one there down. Lucky we've got a line already on 270, 270. Go across 160. Same thing on the top, doesn't have to be exact, as long as we're cutting a piece that's actually bigger than the area we're working with. Now what we do is take our utility knife, very straightforward, we've got our markings. All we want to do is just cut that paper, score the top of it, and that's it. So if we just run our blade all the way down, put it on its side, give it a little tap from the back, and that'll simply snap right in that position. Now we can take it from the back side, cut that all the way through. Same thing on our other marking. Snap it and cut that paper. So now we've got our new piece cut and ready to go. What we're going to do now is transfer the measurement over onto the damaged ceiling. So all we're going to do is pop that over the top, cover as much of that damaged area as possible. That looks pretty good, pretty much where it is now. And then we're going to take our pencil and just simply trace around the edge. Once that's done, we've now got our marking up on the ceiling, ready to be cut out. So you can see the area that I've traced around. That's pretty much all the area that's going to be cut out. What I'm going to use now is my multi-tool and just cut this one here out. You don't have to use a multi-tool. You can use a utility knife, score around the edge, and then snap it and work back slowly. You can use a plasterboard saw and just cut that through. Multi-saw works nice, crisp and clean, and very, very fast and effective. So like I said, I'm using a multi-tool. Cut all the way around. So now I've pretty much cut all this piece. There's only a little bit left holding it together. And you can see there, I've now removed my crappy piece out of the way. So now this section here has been completely cut out. I've got my filler piece ready to go back in here. It's going to have a perfect fit. What we need to do now is actually run some timber in on top of this ceiling. The reason for that is it provides backing support, and it also helps keep the new piece of drywall, plasterboard, gyprock sheet nice and flush with the existing ceiling. What I'm going to do in this case here is I'm going to run 2 pieces of timber running straight across. So all I have to do is cut 2 scrap pieces of timber, making sure that they're just nice and flush. It's pretty much the only criteria that you're going to need, and also long enough to make it all the way across. So let's get 2 scrap pieces of timber. So now we've got 2 scrap pieces of timber. Like I said, as long as they're flat and they're long enough, that's all that really matters in this case. We're just going to slide them all the way through, have them sit nice and flush up against the ceiling. I'm going to put in 2 pieces here. And then what I'm going to do is take a couple screws, and we're just going to screw these on the outside of the existing drywall, gyprock, plasterboard, whatever it is you guys want to call it. And that's going to secure our backing plate in place. Always handy to carry a couple spares in your hand. You want to hold on to the piece of timber in order to actually have the screw drive in, so you don't push the timber up out of the way. Same thing on the other side. You want to make sure your screws are just below the surface. You don't want them sitting flush or protruding at all. So I like to countersink them just a little bit into that drywall, gyprock, plasterboard. Now that's all screwed in, we've got our backing plate ready to go, and we can install our new piece of, I really got to find another way to say this, plasterboard sheet, drywall sheet, gyprock sheet. We're going to put our new piece up on top. So now we can take our new piece, push that into position, and then we'll take our drill and screw that in as well. And that should sit nice and perfectly flush. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put 2 screws in line with those timber pieces that I put in. So now the ceiling's been patched up, we're ready for our joint compound. So before we apply our joint compound, you can either use fiberglass mesh or paper tape. It's a reinforcing system. Either way, whichever one makes you happy, that's the one that you should use. What I like to use is fiberglass mesh. The only time I actually use the paper tape is whenever I'm doing large jobs or complete sheeting. So what I want to do first is just take a little scraper, take away any of those little imperfections. It'll make it a little bit easier, cleaner to work with, and also easier to apply my joint compound. So just a quick scrape back. And now that's ready to go. So what I want to do first is I'm going to take my fiberglass mesh, and I'm going to cut my pieces ready to go once I find the end of this seam or this joint. So roughly get my measurements. That's the other benefit of having the adhesive one. You can just stick that on the ceiling, and we'll get back to that later on. Mind you, this whole ceiling is going to be painted, so I'm not too concerned if I've got fingerprint marks or anything like that on here. When it comes to your fiberglass mesh, in particular, try not to overlap your mesh. So even if you cut it a little bit shorter, it's a lot better than overlapping. Overlapping is going to make it a lot harder to apply your joint compound. It's harder to get it flush, and more than likely your joint knife is going to get stuck on it and end up ripping everything off. So we'll just cut these nice and short, keep them on the ceiling for later. And now I'm going to mix up my joint compound. What I'm using in this case is just a quick set. So we've got a 10-minute rapid set joint compound, and the reason why I'm using that is just to have it dry up a lot quicker. Now before I actually apply my joint compound and my mesh, what I like to do first is just fill in this joint with the joint compound, so I've got it completely running all the way through before I actually put on my mesh. A lot of people tend to put the mesh on top and then try and smear it through the mesh. Not a great idea. It's a lot easier to just get it through these joints and cracks, and then we'll get our joint compound on after. Let me answer my phone. So we'll just fill up all these joints first before we actually run our tape. Pushing that in, getting it in as far as you can. Now that we've got that all on, we can apply our mesh. So we'll get our little pieces of mesh that we hung up on the wall or on the ceiling, line them up. And now we can finish patching off our ceiling. So just being very careful when you first put it on. Try and just smear it all through. Let it all hold into place. Now with the first coat, not really too concerned on how it goes on. We basically just want it all to hold in position. Fix everything in place. And then we'll worry about it on our second and third coat. So at the moment, we're just going to skim that all the way across, especially because it's a quick set. We haven't got much time to work it. So just a little close-up of what my one looks like at the moment. It's not pretty by any means, but remembering this is only the first coat, we've still got a second and third coat to go, and that's where we're going to do all our perfecting. So at the moment, this one here is a quick set. I've got 10 minutes of work time. Need to get it on there as quick as possible and let this one here set, and then we're going to get back onto it when it comes time for our second and third coat, and we're going to be able to perfect it. So if your one at home doesn't look very pretty and you can see the seams or you can see the tape underneath, don't be too concerned. We're going to be able to fix that on our second and third coat. So once the first coat's completely set, we'll take our joint knife and we're just going to run it over the surface, removing any of the high spots. Just a little bit easier than sanding. You might find there's a couple of high spots. So we just want to quickly get rid of those. Then we can take our sander. We're using a 120 grit sandpaper, and we're just going to give it a quick light sand, followed by our second and third coat. So this time around, we're going to apply our second coat of compound. We're going to go a little bit further than what we initially did. The first section came up to about here. This time around, we're going to go out a little bit further than that, and we're going to try and feather out our compound. So we're going to try and put a little bit more effort this time. We're not using a quick set, it's a top coat, and we're going to go as fine as possible. Try and smooth out any of those imperfections and balance everything out. So we're just going to run this all the way across. Just first get it all on there, and then I'll spread that all out. So now that we've got this one here fairly level, what I'm going to do is switch over to my bigger knife. And I'm going to use the bigger knife to give that nice consistency all the way across. This helps get a nice level finish. And an important thing to note is that the better job you do at patching, the less sanding you're going to have to do. So it's worth putting in a little bit more time into your patching to make sure that you don't have to do as much sanding, especially when you're up on the ceiling working. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to feather that out, putting a little bit more pressure on the edge here, just to squeeze out that material and try and feather everything out. So you can see there I've actually removed some of the compound that was up on the ceiling. And I'll show you guys a close-up of what that looks like. So if we have a closer look up the top, you can see just how much of a better finish that is now. We're feathering out the edge, so you can see it's very, very fine all the way on the edge. It's not too much of a concern at the moment because we can still sand that off when we come back to our third coat. But for the moment, this is actually looking pretty good. So it's nice, flat, level, smooth surface that we're working with. Everything's pretty much feathered out. It'll just take a very, very light sand after this one here sets, and then we'll get done on our third coat, and we should be ready to get started on painting. So now the second coat's completely dry. We're ready for our third coat. It honestly looks pretty good at the moment. If I really wanted to, I could leave it on the second coat and not go through the final coat. However, because it is a ceiling, I want to make sure that I feather that out just a little bit more. So I'm going to give it one last sand. Just a light sand will do it. We'll just get all the product on there. Then we'll use the bigger knife and flatten everything out, spread it out nice and consistent. So now we'll switch over to the bigger knife. And we can use that to flatten everything out, make sure we feather our edges. Now we'll let this one here dry once again. Once it's ready, give it our final sand and we're ready for painting. All right guys, so the third coat is finally dry. It's now time for our final sand. Once it's sanded, what we're gonna do is simply paint it. Now, usually what you do in this case is apply a primer before painting, especially on this patched area here. But in my case, I'm using a paint and prime ceiling paint. Now, so I won't have to apply the primer separately. But like I said, just a quick sand. That's all it takes now. And I'll show you guys a close-up. Guys, so this is a close-up of the finished patched area. So the reason why we spread it out so far is to simply blend it in. And that's why the most important thing is to just feather your edges. So you can see all the way around, our edges are feathered. That's what's gonna give us our perfect transition. So now I'm gonna get straight into painting and I'll see you guys in a bit. All right guys, once it's been primed and painted, this is the finished product. So it's a very simple, straightforward procedure. Hopefully now, after watching this video, you can get out there and do some of the repairs yourself. If you have any concerns or questions, put them in the comment section below. As always guys, like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, I'm Bill. Thanks for watching. Bill's out too.